Great. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Sorry, I'm looking at two screens here. I'll try and look at the screen here and not so much worry about what's going on the deal. My name is Keith Griswold. I'm the Assistant State Con for Programs here in Washington State for NRCS. I'm going to be talking to you about the Farm Bill programs that are available through NRCS. Congress writes a Farm Bill every 5 to 7 years, and then they provide NRCS the ability to administer that out to the nation. So good morning, everyone. All right, that did not do it. Hold on. All right. So the typical Farm Bill programs that NRCS administers is the EQIP, or the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, and it is our Fix-It program. If you have a landowner that has an issue, and it can be all the way from forestry issues to sound-lawnted passage issues, to crop soil health issues, rangeland, wildfire, you name it, the EQIP program is where our landowners and participants typically come in for assistance. The Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP, it is more of the enhanced program for participants that have already solved the majority of the resource concerns on their property, but are willing to take their conservation practice a step further. And we pay them to adopt enhancements on the ground that further the conservation goals. There is the ASEP program, or the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program. It was merged in the last Farm Bill to incorporate the ALE, or the Agricultural Lands Easements. And those are our working lands that you could think about, whether it's cropland or rangeland or pasture, but it's working ag lands, and we purchase the development rights to keep it in agriculture and prohibit development. And then there's the WRE portion, or the Wetland Reserve Easement portion of the ASEP program. And that is where we buy we buy the development rights for degraded wetlands and restore them as close as we can to the natural condition post development. So there can be items where we can no longer get it to the pre-development stage, but we get it back to a wetland stage, and in acting with either the floodplain and or with the wildlife and the environment that's there. And then lastly, what's available is the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, or otherwise known as RCPP. Under the previous Farm Bill, RCPP was a shotgunned approach and allowed for multiple things. Under the 2018 Farm Bill, both Congress and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, has refined what can be done in there, and also the requirements of the partners, the lead partners, on what they're going to do for the program. So as I stated, EQIP is a voluntary program. We're looking for landowners that want to solve resource concerns on their property. It's for working lands that are for livestock or crop production, forestry, range, or wildlife. That's another option. And through EQIP, it's a contract where we work with the landowners for them to install conservation practices to our standards and specifications. And if they do complete it, then we reimburse them the contractual amount. And so each practice that they install will have a contracted dollar value to it for the unit that they install. And you're going to hear me keep saying contracts. NRCS does not do very many grants, and the programs that I'm talking about are contracts. They're not grants, and it has a different connotation. With a grant, if you don't complete it, most of the time items are just said, okay, well, it couldn't be done. We understand. Through NRCS and through the Farm Bill, we have contracts, and if you don't complete it, there's a possibility that the landowner or the participant that signed up for the contract could be held liable for liquidated damages, and they would have to repay costs. So there's no free money here. The Stewardship Program, a CSP program, as I discussed before, is where we're looking at lands that have already implemented a large amount of the conservation practices on their property, but they're going to take it that extra step further, and they're going to adopt additional enhancement or conservation practices or bundles of enhancements to add on to the conservation value that they're doing on their land. And that's where we would provide additional funds and resources for them to adopt those additional measures. Through the CSP program, we're looking at it for a 5-year contract at a minimum. They have 2 types of payments that are in there. One is to help the landowners continue the conservation that they've adopted. It's called an EAP payment, and so they would receive payment per acre on the practices that they've adopted, on the land units that they've adopted. And then we have where if they take on the additional enhancements or conservation practices, we would pay them to adopt those, and once they are, that would add to the value of their contract. We have a minimum annual payment as required by law for $1,500 a year, no matter what your contract award is. So if your contract was on a small, let's say a small 5-acre piece of land somewhere in the Puget Sound working on row crops, and it came out to only be an $1,100 a year contract, we would make a minimum payment of $1,500. So even the small operators can be financially compensated for adopting additional conservation practices. The ASEP program, as I discussed, it's our easement program that we use. And so we're looking at adopting or purchasing the wetland component, where we're going to restore those wetlands back to their value. Then we also have the ALE part, and that's where we're purchasing the development rights so that it stays in agricultural lands. And over the past 25 years, we've worked nationwide to protect 4.4 million acres of wetland and ag lands to restore and improve soil health, water quality, quantity, and wildlife habitat. So under the AL portion of it, most applicants go through a land trust. The land trust then submits the application to NRCS, and it's a 50-50 match. NRCS brings up 50% of the development purchase rights, and the land trust, either through RCO or through other ways that they've obtained money, purchase the other 50% of the development rights. Now there is circumstances under grasslands of special significance or sage grouse initiative where NRCS will pay for 75% of the land value, and the land trust pays for the other 25%. And the landowner has the ability to donate a certain portion of their land value also when they want to increase the likelihood of it being selected for funding with the land trust putting it forward, because quite a few of the land trusts are always having to go to RCO or other granting agencies to obtain the money, and those granting agencies like to see the additional value coming from the landowner. For the WRE portion, they're usually permanent easements that we're looking at, and there's no land trust involved in this portion. It's just NRCS and the landowner. And depending on the length of the easement, whether it's a 30-year easement or 30-year contract with a tribe, or it's perpetual, then depends on how much NRCS is going to pay for the restoration costs of it. So basically, if we buy a perpetual easement, NRCS pays for the restoration of the wetland and at no cost to the participant. The RCPP program is where partners put in a proposal for doing something that is typically outside of NRCS programs, something unique, and also bringing money to the table, whether it's in kind or cash value. RCPP policy requires that it's at least a minimum 50% match, 50% from NRCS and 50% from the lead partner and their other partners. If they bring in a higher value of leverage of money, say the RCPP partner brings in 75%, and we bring in 25%, then it scores higher. We're looking at leveraging dollars for the program. And so we're looking at co-investing money in both money and in-kind projects on the ground. It is ranked nationally, so you're competing nationwide against all the other applicants that are there. There is no Washington-centric pot of money for you to compete in. And to give you an idea of how competitive it is, this year, if I remember right, off the top of my head, we only funded nationwide 38% of the applicants that were received. And in Washington, we received 3 fundings this year that were awarded by headquarters for the RCPP program. It has some core principles that need to be followed for good application. Its impact, what are we trying to solve? What are the priorities that we're looking at? Partner contributions, as I stated before, the more value, the more dollars that the partners bring, the higher the partner contribution ratio, therefore the higher score it'll get. Innovation, what is it that's not like EQIP or CSP or PL566, something that is totally different than most NRCS programs? And then what, different type of flavor are you bringing to the table? What are you solving is what we're looking at. And then the partners or the partnership and their previous management that goes on. So in this case, we're looking at how many partners are you bringing to the table? Are they the right partners? Are you missing partners? And then also, what is the previous management abilities of the lead partner that's submitting it? Quite a few of the questions keep asking in the RCPP proposals of give us an example of how you as the lead partner have been able to manage money. And if that is not there, typically they do not score as high for the application with headquarters, because they're truly looking at past performance of the lead partner to be able to deliver a program. Any questions?
I don't see any hands up yet. Keith, the questions box seems quiet at the moment. So just reminding folks, don't forget to drop your questions into the questions box or raise your hand if you'd like us to unmute you. Did we lose you, Keith?
No, I'm still here.
That might be,
I turned off
my
my
connection.
screen. I turned off my, stop sharing my screen. You should hopefully still be able to see me in the video.
Yes, we can still see you. Well, that questions box is quiet. Folks might be thinking, or don't forget to raise your hand.
I'll be here the entire time. So after Nick talks a little bit, then if you have or you think of an additional question or you throw it in the chat box, I'll be able to answer it too.
Excellent. Thanks, Keith.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to turn off my camera and mute myself.
Okay. Nick Vira, Partnership Liaison at NRCS. Would you like to share your screen, or you just have remarks for us this morning?
Yeah, I didn't have any prepared remarks. I was just kind of back up Keith and see if there's any questions on programs and things, like make sure that that was understandable for the audience and stuff like that.
Well, great, no worries. I'm not seeing any questions in the box yet. Don't forget, folks, if you have questions for Keith or Nick, just raise your hand or type that into the questions box, and we have some time here to handle those. Still pretty quiet so far. Don't be shy. Any questions at all? Well, Keith, I have one for you, and it's around RCPP. Do you have a sense of when the next RFP cycle would open for RCPP?
I'm going to imagine it's going to happen at the beginning of the federal fiscal year. So sometime in October or November of 21 is typically when they go out, and then they'll give it open for 30 to 40 days, depending on how the announcement is rolled out. And then once that is closed up, then we do a review of the documents and submitted to headquarters for approval or for denial. But usually it happens somewhere at the beginning of the first quarter, maybe the second quarter.
Thanks. For those who might be interested in applying for an RCPP, or maybe applying again if you've tried in the past, you did hear Jean Fike mentioned in our last presentation that I worked with Laura Williams at NRCS to put on a webinar last summer before that RFP round opened, and Laura was able to share some real gems of what she was seeing lacking in those RCPP applications coming in, places where those applications could be improved. So you might take a look at that webinar. It is posted up on the Commission's website, and I anticipate that we'll be working together to do something similar like that this summer sometime. So, you know, it's a continuous learning process. Folks who've done really well submitting applications, you know, we'll have lessons learned, and we had a few comments earlier about working the administration of an RCPP. So some preview of coming attractions there to watch for another webinar later on this summer.
I can tell you this, almost all of our awardees have applied multiple times before they got all of the pieces right, all of the correct partnerships right, all of the correct language right in the proposals for headquarters to approve them. So really don't feel bad if you are not successful your first time around. That is not the norm. You are competing nationwide with partners that have put a lot of time and energy and effort into these proposals, and they really rise to the top. We really get to pick through proposals nationwide that are of high quality.
Good point, Keith. So we are seeing a couple questions come in. The first one here, are non-working lands eligible for any of the easement programs, such as undeveloped upland habitat not currently grazed or associated with a farm?
Ooh, for ALE, no, that'd be really difficult to pull it in, because we are basically purchasing the development rights of those lands, and without it being utilized for some agricultural commodity or product, and also wildlife habitat that is providing, I'm not sure if it will qualify for the program.
Okay, thanks, Keith. The next question, does CSP apply to new landowners on land that has had previous conservation work through a different owner?
Possibly. Those are big if and difficult questions. And the reason why I say that is to be eligible for CSP, you have to show your management style has been adopted to that land. So if you just purchase it, how are you able to say that the last year I installed cover crops on the property? Now, if it's been 2 years ago and you've had 1 year of management on the land and you've brought over your adopted conservation practices to that new land, then yes, it could be eligible.
Okay. The next question, could you talk more about the WRE? How are the wetlands assessed for degradation? I often work with landowners that have wetlands, and I'm unclear when I can refer them to this program.
Oh, that's a big question. And the reason why is we look at what type of wetland historically was there previously, and then what type of modifications or alterations have been done to it. Here's a good example. So if you had just a riparian wetland and livestock have accessed the creek and have degraded that wetland, well, then it's one thing where we would assess it as the riparian corridor is not in good shape. Livestock fencing would remove them from it, and then we can determine if plantings are needed in order to get the riparian habitat back into shape. That's a real simple measure. You get out in the estuaries that have been diked lands, then we're looking at restoration of a larger scale of, all right, can we remove the dikes? Are they in a drainage district? If so, should we look at even purchasing these easements? Because there are other state or county ordinances in there that would restrict the restoration back to a wetland. So there's no clear-cut answer of whether it'll qualify or not. I would advise you that if you have a landowner that is interested in the WRE program, to have them submit the application to their local field office. I can tell you this: we will be making an announcement for applications for the WRE program either December of 2020 or January of 2022. Sorry. December of 2021 or January of 2022. So we're in the process of getting all of our restoration goals and objectives set statewide so that we can look at the applications that we have and determine which easements, wetland easements we are interested in purchasing.
Thanks so much, Keith. The next question, I'm going to go to Laura. Laura, you should just be self-muted now.
Hi, Shauna, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. Hi, Nick and Keith. Thanks for being here.
No
I've got a question. So a lot of us have been hearing a lot about climate smart agriculture and the focus on that at the federal level. And we also know there's a new farm bill on the horizon. So I've got a two-part question for you about that. We're curious what changes or additions you might anticipate to farm bill programs in relation to climate smart practices. And then the second part is if you have any advice for conservation districts on how they could position themselves and their communities to take advantage of those potential climate smart farming support opportunities.
Well, I'll tell you my side of the story. The Farm Bill, the development of the Farm Bill is a little outside of my purview. I take the Farm Bill that's given to me and the policy that's provided by the agency and implement it on the ground under the rules that are provided there. I can tell you this: we are currently looking at the Farm Bill to be released or proposed to be released at the end of 2023. That would be the 5-year cycle that it typically is. If the administration and Congress decides it needs to be a little bit longer, they have in the past given extensions to the current farm bill so that they can come to a compromise of what needs to be done. I'm going to turn it over to Nick. Like I said, I play on the back end of a completed farm bill and then the delivery of it in the field. So Nick, you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, so the climate smart is, we're looking at that, and the rules aren't really out yet, or the parameters of what it's going to be yet, but it's based on my research. It's going to be more of what our programs are, just more of them, more funding for them, and more availability of them. The new administration has their new endeavor, which is their 30 by 30 plan. So if that's kind of, I assume that those two will be linked together. If you're interested in that, let me know. Reach out to me. I'll put, I don't know, maybe Shauna, can you put my email in the chat? Or I can just say it's Nick.
I get it. I'll get it.
Okay, thank you. And I'd be happy to send anybody some information on that. As far as the second question, which was what districts can do to position themselves to be well poised for these new things, I unfortunately don't have a great answer for that, other than just keeping attuned to what's going on. And as far as right now, this point in time, there's not like an opportunity for enrollment of anything like that. It's just more, here is 2 stone tablets of what we have planned to do. We're going to write this into 1,000 pages of rules and guidelines. I hope that's somewhat helpful.
Yes, thank you, Nick and Keith. Great questions coming in. I have one that I'm going to chuck out at the two of you to see if you might be able to speak a little bit more to this. I'm hearing that CRP has been expanded, and I'm learning a little bit more about what's called the Clear 30 opportunity under that. Could you share a little bit about if you see opportunity for that to really get on the ground in Washington? What are you guys hearing about that expanded opportunity?
I have not heard much about it.
I'll jump in here. So yes, there is an extension of the CRP sign up that is available. The Clear 30 looks at 30-year contracts instead of 10 to 15 like the previous CRP program works on. But my knowledge is very limited. CRP is not an NRCS program, it's an FSA program. So I would always advise you to contact your local FSA CED in the USDA offices to be able to ask them questions or look online. But I do know the Clear 30 are basically 30-year contracts instead of the 15 years that typical CRP contracts are.
Thanks, that is helpful.
Oh, no, I remembered something else. Yeah, it jumped out. The Clear 30 also provides increased payment rates, rental rates, and increased practice adoption rates too. So I know there's quite a bit of the forestry component that they're talking of bringing into it for carbon sequestration.
Okay, great. So might be worth folks who are participating today, if any of that sounds of interest to you, to get in touch with your local FSA staff for more details.
Hey, Shauna, I just wanted to throw out, I didn't really introduce myself at the beginning, but I'm the state partner liaison, and I wanted to thank you for putting my email in the chat. And if I'm kind of your one-stop shop to NRCS. If you have any questions for who does what, I need to talk to somebody about wetlands, Clear 30, things that I don't know about. My job is to find those subject matter experts and to link people to those. So with any questions related to Farm Bill or outside of Farm Bill, NRCS wise, don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Thanks, Nick. Really appreciate that. One more question coming into the questions box. There was a conservation collaboration NRCS grant that someone had heard would have an RFP soon. Sounded like maybe that started going around last fall, but hasn't really seen that RFP come out nationwide. Do you all know anything about that conservation collaboration grant? Does that ring a bell at all?
No, it sounds like maybe was it something to do with the pandemic?
Not sure. I'm gonna call on you, Kelly, if you want to share a little more context there.
Yeah, it was called the Conservation Collaboration Grant. It was an NRCS grant, and the woman that I was talking to, I'm not sure if she was in DC, but she was definitely East Coast time, was Vivian Dixon. She and I went back and forth a ton, and she said, it's coming out, it's any day now. And I don't know, I could go look in my email and try to figure out like what the actual, it was on the grants.gov and all of that. And there was an announcement for it. There was a grant that happened. It was like I'm losing track of time because of COVID, but maybe in 2019 or 2018. And then this was a second round of it. And then, and then there were some, and on grants.gov, that particular grant came out in certain states. And then I had communicated with Joe Williams and said, hey, is this going to happen in, Washington? And he said, I still can't understand exactly the details of like why, certain states are allocated and certain weren't. He said, if it comes out as a nationwide grant, then, you could apply for it that way. And then it didn't. And I haven't reached out to Vivian Dixon since then because I contacted her so many times to ask about it that I just haven't. Anyway, that's the background. I was just curious if you knew much about anything more about it.
It sounds like you probably know as much about it, if not more than what we do. Unfortunately, I think it's one of those projects that's administered by the national office. But if you want to send me some info, I can definitely do some research on that and get you an answer.
Cool. Yeah, I will definitely, because it looked like a grant that would be a really great one to partner with tribes, and that's kind of what we were looking at it as.
Okay. Yeah, there's some things that are offered by national, and what this sounded like was CIG, but it's not that, because that's something that we have the opportunity to offer locally, but we don't. So yeah, we'll see what we can find on that.
Cool. I'll reach out to you. Thanks.
Looks like there are also a couple of links being shared in the questions box to NRCS press releases. So Alyssa is kicking those links out to all of you. Maybe take a look there. Okay, that's all the questions I see at the moment in the questions box. Don't forget to raise your hand or type in that question. We'll just give it a couple more minutes before we go ahead and wrap up their session this morning.
I'm looking at one of the links to the conservation collaboration grant while we're waiting, and it looks like this is one of those that I mentioned administered by the national office that doesn't really have a lot of involvement from the states. But I'll have to peruse this up a little bit further before I report back. So send me an email and I'll respond.
Thank you, Nick. And once again, Nick Vira's email is in the chat box, folks. So if you want to continue to carry on a conversation around that, you can grab Nick's email address there.